My name is Hayden Elza. I work at the Wisconsin State Cartographer's Office, often short to SCO or SCO. I'm a software engineer developer there. Today I'm going to talk about our journey making our first ArcGIS Maps SDK for JavaScript application. ArcGIS Maps SDK for JavaScript is a mouthful. You'll probably hear me say JavaScript SDK instead. But yeah. First off, this presentation isn't necessarily about coding, but it is talking about the things that are around coding. I will talk about the software we use and stuff in the stack, but for the most part, it's kind of a lot of project planning and execution. So at least project planning and execution when you're using Maps or the JavaScript SDK, and also with a caveat of when you're, or not when you're at, but if what we did at the SEO. Throughout this, you'll hear all the things we did. Some of them will make sense for you if you're developing with the JavaScript SDK. Some of them won't. You decide what works for you. Takeaways. I like talking about takeaways early in the presentation so that throughout it you can figure out what it is you're trying to get away from this presentation, or what I hope you take away from this. First off, in the planning phase, I'm going to talk about design specifications. I'm going to try to convince you that design specifications are a worthwhile endeavor to spend time on. Prototyping, if you've never done prototyping, I'm going to try to convince you that prototyping is useful and it doesn't take that much time, and the amount of information that you gain from it is really helpful. Last is the development. The thing I want you to take away is I'm going to be showing a lot of different software that we use. Some of it you maybe never heard of, some of it may seem too complicated for you, but ultimately I want to say utilize the tools that make things easier for you. If it makes it more complicated, don't bother with it. So the title of the presentation is alluding to the fact that it's our first application using the JavaScript SDK. And so that application is the Wisconsin Historic Aerial Imagery Finder, also a mouthful. We often shorten it to WHAIFinder. I'm going to start out by showing demos of what the old application looked like and the new application looks like, so you can get an idea, have that context in your head as we go through some of the different planning process that we did and the examples that I give. Yeah, so starting out, old WHAIFinder. This is a video, so hopefully it plays. Cool. It's a map application. Zoom in, there are white points. If you hover over points, you get some imagery previews. If you want to search for a place, top left, there's a search. I'm going to Norwalk, Wisconsin, which is in Monroe County. Click on it. We're there. The point is still white, and when I hover over it, and it'll still do the preview. If you click on the map, it'll highlight images that overlap that clicked point in red. So I'm showing that, that one doesn't quite overlap. Okay, so it's still white. That's the general function of this. If we want to look at an image, we click on a point. There's a pop-up. We've got our small, medium, and large downloads that we have. Also preview. If you click on the preview, in order to look at the image where you can zoom in and pan around, it opens in another tab. This is the old application. We actually have some improvements in the new one we'll see in a second. If we want to look at another image, we're moving up here, click on a preview again. So that's kind of the workflow of the old application. Now the new application. This is the new WHAIFinder. Still can zoom in and zoom out. There's a map. Points are blue this time. Oh, different. There's a lot more points. So actually, when we zoom all the way out, we don't show all the points. Otherwise, it gets pretty congested. We're going to search Norwalk, Wisconsin. Pops over there. One of the first things you'll notice is no images are previewed when we hover over. Instead, it's an extent. That was a decision we made because we didn't thought it was overwhelming, and actually because when we click, we see all the points that are around here, and you can see that over here there's view buttons. Eventually I'll show that. Oh, yeah, time slider. Because there's so many points through so many years, we want to be able to narrow down so you didn't have so many things. Yeah, so we click the view, and now we can view the image on the map. And it stays there. It's not just when you hover. It's not just a transparent preview. It's there. I think in the sample I show adding and removing another one, so it's like, oh, we're moving to another image. But the reality is it doesn't have to be just one image. We actually can put two images on there, and we could play with the transparency. These are 1930s images. They are not geo-referenced very well, so they don't really line up when you do that. But if you take newer imagery and you add it to the map and you do the transparency, it should line up pretty well. Yeah, so there's your context for the applications that we were working on. We had the old one that had like pop-ups, one image at a time, open in a new tab, and the new one, click, get all the images, more years, time slider, all that kind of stuff going on. So, quick overview as far as an outline of what I'm covering. So we're going to talk about planning, which includes design specifications and choosing a technology. Then I'm going to talk about prototyping. So the two ways of prototyping that I use for this, or at least in this presentation, I'm going to talk about are mock-ups, which are just like not actual applications you can do anything with. It's just kind of like you mocked it up in like Illustrator or some other thing that just get an idea of what it looks like. And then I'll talk about doing prototypes in app builders. So yes, we're doing JavaScript SDK. That's what we think we're going to be doing. But we can test out our ideas in like Experience Builder, Instant Apps, or something like that. And the last piece I'll talk about is development. Not too deep into it. I want to keep this kind of high level, but I'll talk about the software stack that we use in our development of the WHAIFinder application. So starting out with planning, our design specifications. There are 5 of them. I'm going to go through each one by one, and we'll have examples. So starting out, define your purpose. What is it that you want to do? In the WHAIFinder application, we wanted to have a web application that allows the general public to easily discover digitized aerial photographs of multiple vintages. So we already have an idea of who it is that is going to be using our applications, general public. And also the what. It's going to be aerial imagery. We also are hinting at a time component in here. All these things are helpful when we're thinking later in our design process of what technology to use or what widgets or interface was going to look like. All of this seems incredibly obvious when you're thinking about project planning, but I think it's worth writing down. Data considerations. Did I skip? No, we're good. Second one out of 5 for our design specifications. Are there any special considerations for your data? Does it have a time component? Is it 3D? Is it imagery? Are there attachments? Maybe you want to edit the data that's there, so you need to have editing permissions or something set up on it. Data collection, are you collecting data, whether it's with your own folks or from the general public? Also, if your layers are large enough, do they need to be tiled for performance? These are things to consider. With the WHAIFinder example here, we have center points of those photos, and those center points have dates associated with them. So there is a time aspect. And the aerial imagery, in the old application, the aerial imagery was not on the map. It's already spoiled for you. In the new application, we decided to put the imagery on the map, and it was possible. So yeah, we wanted to overlay the aerial imagery on the map if that was possible. Third, in our design specifications, audience. Who is the user of the application? Earlier on in defining the purpose, we said general public, but more specifically, we expect that there is no expertise or familiarity with GIS. So it needs to be really simple. We actually found too from our analytics on our old application that a lot of users are coming there from their mobile devices, which means ideally we want this to be mobile friendly. Doing aerial imagery in a web application on your phone, not the easiest place to do that, but I think we did a pretty good job of trying to make that accessible to folks. And also ability to share. So the folks who are using our application probably aren't downloading the imagery and making a map from it to share with others. They're probably just like screenshot or a picture or something and then send to their family. Ideally, someday we want to make it so that the link of like what image that's added on in that exact moment and where they're zoomed and stuff. But we ran out of time to get that in our first go. We'll get it in the next few months, I think. But that would be a great way to share is just like take the link and it shows exactly what they saw. Fourth, design and customization. This is probably the thing that you think about a lot when project planning is you're probably just thinking, yeah, what do I want it to look like? So we got layout, branding, and what kind of interaction. With the WHAIFinder example, we wanted our SEO, the State Cartographer's Office branding. We wanted the search and the map to be prominent, so when someone comes there, they're just like, we want to answer the question, the first question that needs to be answered is where? Where do you want imagery? So you either could search, like I showed in the demos of like the Norwalk, Wisconsin, zooms in there, or if someone just knows where that is and doesn't even know the name, they could use the map to zoom into that area. It's just the quick answering of where, and then we can give them the images that are there. The results panel, initially we want that kind of hidden. We don't want to confuse people. One idea was originally just showing whatever images were in the extent, but if you start at the Wisconsin state level, that is 100,000 images, and that's not going to be helpful to anyone. Also, because there are so many images, being able to filter by year would be really helpful as well. Last thing to consider in your design specifications. Who is creating your application, and what do they know, what time do they have available, and if they don't know the thing, do they have the desire to learn the thing? An example of WHAIFinder, I was a developer. I consider myself fairly experienced in web development. I only had a basic experience with JavaScript SDK before getting into this. I had done some stuff, but nothing at the scale of like a production application that we had for this. However, I had the time and willingness to learn the technology. We are moving all of our applications over to the Esri ecosystem. Any time that I put into learning for this application is going to be able to be reused in our future applications. Yeah, so beyond our design specifications, once you kind of lay out what it is that you want to do and what you do want and not want to do, you have to choose a technology. There are a lot of different ways to conceptualize choosing a technology. This is the simplest one, and that's why I wanted to present it, because I think it's really easy. Yeah, on this continuum of time and customization, on one end you've got the really fast and simple. This is Instant Apps. All Instant Apps does is takes your web map, you slap it into an application, and then it looks nice, but it doesn't really add much a lot of the time. On the other end, slow but highly customized, is the ArcGIS JavaScript SDK. WHAIFinder, we definitely were on this end based on our specifications, especially in the specifications we talked about. There's like a time slider. Yeah, I think there is a time slider like in Instant Apps possibly, but definitely in Experience Builder. But to add the images to the map, so we have geotiffs that are on S3 bucket. In order to add those, you really need to have the JavaScript SDK. In between, there's the other applications. I would say Instant Apps, very easy. I would lump dashboards and story map together. They get some more functionality, but still pretty limited. Experience Builder, quite open in what you can do. It's like a website builder. It's very, very flexible. And then if you've ever heard of Experience Builder Dev Edition, the idea is that you can also make custom widgets that get added into Experience Builder. There are some cases where this makes sense. But yeah, in the end, for our application WHAIFinder, the SDK made the most sense. Prototyping. So we're past the initial planning stage, and now we're trying to test some things to figure out what it is we want to do. So there are 3 prototypes that I'm going to show, and these prototypes are testing 2 ideas each. So at the bottom here, I've written timeline focused and pop-ups. So we're seeing, okay, we want to test the idea of, do we like a timeline, not just a time slider, but like a timeline that has like a flag with a name of the image or something like that on it. And also, would a pop-up be nice? The original application had a pop-up. Do we want to continue with that? Another thing to test would be sidebar and nearby search. So instead of a pop-up, would a sidebar be better? That's what we want to test. And then instead of clicking on a point and getting a single image, would it be nice if we got multiple images that are returned, whether it's a nearby search or overlapping extents or something like that? The last one we want to test is no points and search focus. So the basic idea was, this is the general public. They don't necessarily know, oh, I can click on a point. What if we made it really simple where it's step-by-step, where they set some filters, set the area, meaning like any images within that extent would just be returned into this column, and then if they clicked on an image, that would be shown in more detail in that last column. So those were mock-ups to get it to breathe some life into these prototypes, to actually click around and see how they work. We were using app builders. This first one actually doesn't use an app builder. This is the JavaScript SDK. However, it's using map components. I'll talk about those later. But map components are just like easy widgets you can use to build your ideas very quickly. So this first one was, we got the timeline, we've got the pop-ups, and this is at the point where I can get stakeholder feedback. The feedback was they liked filtering time with slider, so this was a win, and I didn't code this. This is just a widget that is available in the map components. They were neutral on because originally they thought they wanted to hide all points when we were zoomed out at the Wisconsin level. But then they were like, actually, it's not as bad as they thought. And then the other feedback for dislike was couldn't see the base map under the points when zoomed out. So the feedback that this was getting is, one, we do like the time slider, and also then they started talking about symbology. So even though I wasn't trying to test symbology in this prototype, we still got good feedback that we could use later. Next one, sidebar with the nearby search. So the feedback on this one, and this one was built in Experience Builder, so there is a nearby search in Experience Builder. That was cool. The feedback was that the stakeholders liked the sidebar over the pop-up, so immediately we've decided we're going with sidebar, not pop-up, so prototypes are helping us in that decision. And disliked the distance from the point. But it wasn't that they didn't like showing multiple images. What they disliked is that it was just a default buffer. Instead, the feedback was, let's get it so that all the photos that overlap the point are shown. Because I think when someone clicks on a point, they just want to know what photos contain this area that I'm trying to look at. And if you're just doing a buffer, that's not going to really help. The last prototype was the search focus. I was actually pretty proud of putting this together. This was an experience builder, and it went pretty quick. Kind of did a step-by-step for users to make it really easy, and then walk through to find what they want. However, the immediate feedback was, we hate it. We don't like this at all. And part of it might be because we're GIS users, and we're like, where are the points? I want to click on the points, right? Yeah, ultimately we found the extent filter was confusing. I think maybe you could have made it more, with more language and stuff, it could have been, but I think if you're doing that, you're just fighting against people's natural inclinations, and that just means it's bad design. So ultimately, we didn't go with it. So it was very good that we tested this idea, despite it being actually one of our favorites before we tested it. So it was quite, the prototypes was helpful to quickly decide, no, we don't want this. Yeah, so getting off of the prototypes, and now we're getting into development. I'm going to cover the stack that we used. So starting out, we have our build tools. The first of the build tools at the very bottom of this stack would be Node. We use Node mostly for the Node package manager, NPM, but also you can run servers with Node. The package manager is nice because if we want to install the ArcGIS core, it's easy command, npm install. This is as opposed to using like importing it as a script in your HTML. Instead, we install it, and then we can use build tools and such. But better than using npm install, there's a file in projects that's called package.json. That is a way of specifying what packages you have, dependencies, and then what version you want them to be. If you've ever used environments or like a virtual environment in Python, you probably are familiar with this. It's basically saying, I want this software and I want this version, and in this way you can assure that everything works together, whether it's on your own or with other developers. On top of Node, we also have Vite. Vite is a build tool that allows us to deploy the site into production as a static site. So when we're all done, everything gets built together into common files and minified, and hopefully that means everything runs well in production, and also means the production server doesn't have to be any special like Node server or something. Instead, it's just HTML served up by Apache or whatever else web server that you have. So with Vite, if we want to run a dev instance, we just run Vite. If you want to build, run build. Quite simple. Svelte. So Svelte is a UI framework. If you've heard of React or Vue.js or something like that, it's a lot like that. The whole idea is that you're creating components. Who here has heard of a UI framework before? Oh, more than I thought. I'm going to go quickly then and explain why it might be useful for the folks who haven't heard of them. So imagine we have this results list. So by that, I mean, think about like you click on the map in the WHAIFinder application, you got a list of images that are returned back. How do we display those on the sidebar? Well, we can take a component and use it as a template and just go, oh, there's result 1, copy that, result 2, just inject the information that we want that's unique to each result, but use all the other pieces of information that don't change as the component. Beyond reusing within the same application, you could also reuse a component between applications. So at the SEO, we have quite a few applications. More than one probably have a search functionality. And so if we build search functionality once, we can reuse it again. And also, if we need to update that, all of them get updated. So at a certain point, if your project is large enough, or you have multiple projects that are using the same thing, components can start to make sense for you. ArcGIS JavaScript SDK. Core, that's the main thing that you're thinking about when you are using the SDK, has anything that you can do in ArcGIS Online, you can actually do with the JavaScript SDK. A lot of times I'm thinking about applications where users are looking at a map, but you can manage users in your ArcGIS Online organization with the JavaScript SDK. You could also do it in the Python SDK or the other SDKs. But yeah, it's more than you think. It's not just looking at maps. It also could be like managing organizations, or like find the oldest user in your organization, see if they've been active in the last 2 years, delete it. It's pretty wild. On top of the core is widgets. Widgets start to abstract some of the concepts and make it easier to use. For instance, there is a widget called the Legend widget. You're probably familiar with the Legend widget if you've ever used the web map builder in ArcGIS Online. You could use the widget, or you could build it with the core if you really wanted to. You could take your map object, grab your layers. For each layer, grab the title. Okay, put that in a list. Now go back, grab all the symbology, and then put that up there. You could do that, or someone has already done that at Esri, and then they decided, we'll release that as a widget, and you could just use the widget. So everything that the widgets can do, you can do yourself with the core, but if it's built and it works for your needs, save the time. Map components. It's similar to widgets in that it abstracts things, but it abstracts things even a higher level. So the map components are pretty cool. They are web components. They're HTML elements. So if you're used to div or h2 or whatever, it's the same thing. So you can have a tag now that is ArcGIS map. And there's an item ID if you're familiar with the ArcGIS Online. When you look in the URL, there's an item ID. It just uniquely identifies your thing. And then also, it's easy to add other widgets to your map, because you could be, okay, here, ArcGIS Home, put it in the top left. ArcGIS Zoom, put it in the top right. It's that easy. And if you're thinking that there isn't a map component that does what you need to do, there's a good chance that there is. Yeah, for instance, you can see time slider here. We use that in our prototype, which made it easy to make that. Last piece, calcite design system. So we have a way to build it. We have how to make the functionality. How do we want to make it look? So the calcite design system is a UI kit with icons, color schemes, but more importantly, components. So the components could be like buttons or panels, accordion, alerts, all these types of things. And again, if you think they don't have what you need, chances are they do. Obviously, if you use this, or maybe not obviously, so I'll say this, if you use this, your app is going to look a lot like an Esri application because it's designed in their design system, but maybe that's a good thing. It saves you a lot of time. You don't have to design some things yourself. They make all the components meet accessibility standards, which is good, but also if you're going to do any mobile optimization, a lot of this stuff is very flexible in your ability to also go from desktop to mobile. So if you wanted to take a picture, you could take a picture. Here's the stack. I will provide a link to the slides at the end if you want to come back and look at this. Some learning resources. I've included some learning resources here. Obviously, you can't click on them in a presentation. The intention is you can go back and look at the slides. But I did provide some ways to learn about the JavaScript SDK on its own with map components and then calcite. So a few different options here to get introduced to these topics if you haven't before. Also, the Vite and Svelte. This first one is from Esri, just saying hey, if you want to build with Vite, here's how you do it. Doesn't involve Svelte yet. These two are Svelte. One is from Esri. They had a blog post on it. So Svelte is probably a lesser known JavaScript framework, but known enough that Esri covered it. And this other is a video from someone that actually is the head person for the calcite design system at Esri. It is on their personal blog, YouTube, whatever. But you can follow along by downloading the GitHub repo, so that's really helpful for learning as well. Or if you just want to learn Svelte in general and know all the functionality that's in there of using components and reactivity and stuff, you can check that out. I'm going to come back to the takeaways. These are the same as before, but I'm going to reinforce them. Let's head back. Planning, use design specifications. They are incredibly useful. If you're working on a very small project, maybe it doesn't make sense. If it takes more time to do the planning than it does to make the application, obviously it doesn't make sense. If you're working on the project by yourself, you might think, why do I need design specifications? I already know what I want in my head. I can get that out there. I think one good reason is, and at least for myself, is scope creep. Not only are you defining in your specifications of what you want to do, it also is implicitly telling you what you don't need to do. So would it be nice to add some certain functionality? The answer might be yes, but also you don't need to in order to meet your purpose. When you're collaborating with others, I think it's especially useful to use design specifications. Your stakeholders have an image in their head of what they want an application to be, but they might have difficulty putting that to words as a developer or as just the team in general who wants to have a successful application. Being able to go through step by step and figure out what it is you want is really helpful for making sure that the project ends successfully. Prototyping. As you saw, we started out just by kind of drawing, and then we made it with app builders. I think prototyping is really useful for testing out ideas and also seeing what is possible. I didn't include it in the slides, but we did some testing to see if adding the geotiffs to the map was going to be successful. And through prototyping, we were able to answer that question to know, yes, it is going to work, and in which case we are going to go with the JavaScript SDK. I also want to point out with the prototyping that it is a very good idea that even if you know for 100% sure you're going to use the JavaScript SDK, use the app builders for your prototyping. You might find that there are widgets there that you didn't think about using, and because it's so quick and easy to just click and drag, that you might find that, oh, actually, that's useful. Or, yeah, just in general, I would say any application that I'm going to develop in the future, I'm always using the app builders like Experience Builder or Instant Apps to do prototyping. Last, development. I'm going to drive this home. You saw the big stack, Svelte, Vite, Node, those all might be very new to you. But ultimately, if it doesn't make sense for you to use them, don't use them. Only use tools if they make your life easier, if that makes your development process easier. Don't complicate things for the sake of complicating so you can like act cool, like, oh yeah, we're using Svelte, so cool. But ultimately, no, it's just, it made sense for us, especially because we have a whole ecosystem of applications, and being able to share components was going to be really useful. And Svelte specifically allows you to build to a static site, which is something that we want to, that keeps us within our design constraints. We don't want to set up some complicated server that responds to like API calls or something. It's just a basic HTML, JavaScript, that kind of thing. So yeah, with that, thanks for listening. And there are a link to the slide either by scanning or going there. And if there's time for questions, I can take questions for the next 2 minutes.
Just one quick question. Just regarding the widgets, you mentioned, you can start from the core, which is basically building from the ground up, and then there's the widgets, which as Reese created. But you can take an existing widget and then just configure it for your own purpose, correct?
Yeah, so there are configurations with each one that you can set. Sometimes it's kind of limited, maybe beyond scope of the presentation, so I didn't mention it, but with widgets, they also have view models. So it's like the code behind the thing to make it run. And so, for instance, I use the time slider there in the WHAIFinder application, but that's using a calcite component slider, but in the back end, it's the view model that would be for the widget. So there is some flexibility there, yeah.
You just mentioned earlier that you utilize TIFFs from Amazon buckets. So you're actually referencing them directly from Amazon?
So I say S3 bucket, but technically it's the S3 technology and it's hosted on campus. But yes, it's
okay.
It's in a S3 like storage on campus, and yeah, it's accessed directly. So in the service, there is a field with the URL, and it's loading that directly. And so the geotiffs were processed earlier, where they have like I guess I call it a pyramid, I don't know what you call it, but it's like pre-rendered different extents so that it's like tiled, and this way we can stream it over the web really easily. Yeah.
I think that's all the time we have for questions, so thank you, Hayden, one more time.